The name is Jesus, only Jesus. Oh, only Jesus. Only Jesus.
Welcome back to Faithful Chats. Today we're wrapping up Matthew chapter 5 with one of Jesus' most challenging commands, loving your enemies. This teaching, found in Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 to 48, flips human instincts on their head and calls us to reflect God's radical love.
That's right. Jesus begins with, "You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy."
Now, the command to love your neighbor comes straight from Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. But the part about hating your enemy? That's not in the Bible. Over time, some people interpreted God's commands for justice and protection of Israel as permission to despise outsiders or those who wronged them.
Exactly. But Jesus breaks that narrative. He says, "But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you."
This is a radical call. Loving your enemies doesn't mean agreeing with them or ignoring their wrongdoing. It means choosing to act with grace, kindness, and forgiveness, even when it's undeserved.
And praying for those who persecute you? That's a game changer. Prayer softens our hearts and shifts our perspective, helping us see others the way God does.
Then Jesus gives us the reason behind this command. He says, "That you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous."
This is beautiful. God's love isn't selective. It's generous and unconditional. He provides for all people, whether they acknowledge him or not. By loving our enemies, we reflect his heart and show that we're part of his family.
Exactly. Jesus goes on to say, "If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that?"
This is convicting. It's easy to love people who are kind to us or who fit into our circle, but Jesus calls us to go beyond what's easy or expected and love in a way that stands out.
And then he finishes with, "Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect."
Now that can sound overwhelming. How can we possibly be perfect? But the word here for perfect means whole or complete. Jesus is inviting us to pursue a life of complete love, modeled after God's perfect love.
So how do we actually live this out?
It starts with small steps. Maybe it's reaching out to someone you've been avoiding, or choosing to respond with kindness instead of anger when you're wrong.
And don't underestimate the power of prayer. Praying for someone who's hurt you can feel hard, but it opens the door for God to work in both your heart and theirs.
It's also about perspective. When we remember how much grace we've received from God, it becomes easier to extend that same grace to others, even our enemies.
Listeners, here's a question for you this week. Who in your life do you struggle to love? And what's one step you can take to show them kindness or grace?
We'd love to hear your thoughts or stories. Next time, we'll move into Matthew chapter 6, where Jesus teaches about giving to the needy, another powerful call to live out our faith in practical ways.
Thanks for joining us on Faithful Chats. Until next time, let's strive to love with the same radical, unconditional love that God shows us every day.
As we wrap up today's episode, we want to remind you that we don't shy away from difficult topics just like the Bible. We believe tackling challenging subjects head-on is important, because that's how we grow and learn together.
However, we know that sometimes these kinds of conversations don't exactly help with the algorithms. So if you found today's episode valuable, we'd love for you to share it with friends, Christian or otherwise. Help us spread these important messages far and wide.
If you'd like to support the creation of these episodes and help us continue diving into tough but essential topics, consider becoming a patron or grabbing some merch. All the information is below. Your support makes all the difference.
Thank you for listening. And until next time, keep growing in faith, truth, and love.